Okay, good afternoon. And I was asked to speak into the microphone. There are people attending virtually. And Josiah said to me, Josiah, the head of the Colorado Community Action Association, he thought there are about 200 people signed up online. So they can listen, and about 100, he said 125 or 150 physically at the conference, okay? So some of you were in the earlier session with my colleague Joanne McLean on logic models, and this one is social return on investment. And I'm Fred Richmond, Center for Applied Management Practices. And for those, how many of you have taken Roma training? Okay, pretty much everyone. So I'm the guy in the blue book, you know, the cover, right, as I mentioned. So just give you a little background on this. The original Roma curriculum had 8 modules. The book has 7, and the reason is when this was done live, it was a 3-day training. People stayed in a remote, went to a training place. People enjoyed being away and all that good stuff, and then it became a bit of a burden, and unfortunately, the last module in the entire Roma was social return on investment. It was probably the most popular model because what it did is it tied together everything in the Roma cycle, everything that was led up to applying what you learned in terms of theory. So that's the background. What we did is we did spin it off as a separate course. And we did an all-day course so people could do calculations and things like that. So this is not a typical PowerPoint. It's super heavy in terms of the content, the reason being that you can download it and it really doubles as a textbook. Okay, so you have content. And given this climate these days, please feel free to use the material that's in here, okay? It'd be nice if you attribute it, but I'll leave that up to you, but feel free to use it. The other thing is we're gonna do a live demo on our website, which I'll show you a little bit later. We built a calculator and we put it up there for free. It is more of a teaching tool, but it'll give you the basics of how this thing works. All right, come on in. Okay, there's some seats. It's okay. So we'll show you how to get to the calculator. It does go to our website. It does require a name and a email. However, I promise you, you're not going to get solicited, okay? It's not any way to do that, and we won't. But the idea being that when we get to that, I'll explain what it is and how you could potentially use it to demo to other people as well, okay? So, okay, what I want to do is just give a brief little history lesson here. So this goes back to, again, what we learn in all the human services. The mission is the foundation. It underlies everything we do. If you're going to communicate that, especially if we're talking about telling stories and following up David Bradley's speech, I think we need to think about what is our mission. And the words like safety net, strengthen family relationships, achieve economic security, I think that's kind of what we're about. The second bullet is, and I speak from personal, a lot of folks have no idea what we do and why we do this. I mean, they just don't get it. And I think to some degree, we have not done a good job communicating that either, okay? So what this does is it introduces another dimension. I think we are very familiar with the social impact, but we want to talk about the economic impact of what we do, basically monetizing some of the things that we do. And it is a business model. How many of you are in C3s, private nonprofits? Are the rest of you government? Wow, okay. That's a little unusual. If you're a C3, the IRS considers you a business. You're just a nonprofit business. And so, interesting. I'm just curious, how many are Colorado folks here? Okay, so most of you are in local, county, municipal government, city? Okay, all right. Because Colorado is I think it's the only state that virtually doesn't have community action agencies. You have CSBG funds that go directly to the agency, then they're subcontracted out to the nonprofit community. So are you aware that you're an unusual model? Like 48 states don't do it that way? I don't know why it was set up that way, but it is, which is kind of unusual, but that's Colorado, okay? All right. So basically, it's been heard before. We're talking about adding the word data storytelling, all right? It's storytelling using data, and that's what we're trying to get here. In using data, what is the message, what we want to achieve, what's done, what's the vision for the future? In the previous session, we talked about a theory of change that communicates a lot of that. And in our data, we want to weave the narrative, the charts, the graphics, the pictures, all the above. So it's not just tables and numbers, it's not just a smiling family feeling good. It's integrating all of that. So the question is, really, it's the second bullet. We are data collectors. We do a reasonably good job at that. But can we use the same data to tell a different story that funding community action is not only a good cause, but a good investment? How many of you in the previous Roma training had Peter Drucker's material? You should have. Okay. One of the textbooks we used in the Roma material was Peter Drucker. He's known as the father of American management. And he has always stated from the beginning, he always saw, and he worked in corporate America for many, many years. His last 15 years of his life devoted exclusively to nonprofits. How many of you were Girl Scouts? Ah, wow, pretty good. Sorry, you didn't raise your hand. Okay, no, it's a bad joke. Okay. He worked with a woman named Frances Hasselbein, and the Girl Scouts were disappearing. They became irrelevant, and the two of them, about 20-some years ago, rebuilt the Girl Scouts, and they became a very viable, healthy organization as they are today. So he really believed in the nonprofit mission, and he put his energies in, but he was the one, when I first started studying this, used the word investment, which is a business term. Okay. So what I just mentioned a minute ago, the IRS, private nonprofit, and basically in many ways you're subject to the same business and economic conditions as the private sector, supply and demand, competition for funds, I'm sure you're aware of, competitive wages, resources. So how do we use, and I'll introduce the two terms, ROI and SROI, to tell our story that investing in us is a good investment, okay? We're still fighting the battles, the second bullet, and that is so much of our data collection was to third parties reporting. You give the numbers to the state gives the numbers to the feds. And a lot of times we're not looking at those numbers. Okay, so for many years, you were rewarded on how many people you served. That was the criteria. Today, it's really how many people improved their lives is what you should be rewarded under. But the compliance was just how many, that's all you reported on, bean counts. But what we are trying to measure is the impact, efficiency, effectiveness, not only that our programs achieve a positive outcome, but we're talking about a monetary value to what we do. Tomorrow morning I am going to talk, and I'm one of the keynotes, as Andrea said, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this as well at the more global level. Oh, there he is. What magic. He just appeared. Okay. So Drucker's comments, sort of really a prophet in the field and a legend. What are the results? And the question he would ask boards of directors, is this a responsible organization worthy of my investment? Because that's what it is. If you're making a donation, a grant, charitable, private giving, it's a donation. And the last bullet is, you'll hold, social sector, talked about everyone, will hold itself accountable for performance inside the organization. It's a business. The thing about businesses, they wouldn't survive if they didn't do this, okay? All right, so let's talk about terminology. And again, the reason this is loaded is you could take this back. It's really a textbook in a PowerPoint form, okay? When we use return on investment, what we're basically saying is we put money into some enterprise and we expect a monetary return back. It's dollar per dollar. That's return on investment. I spend $100, or think about it, you have a savings account, I put $100 in, I got 105 back, that's return on investment. Okay, however, in our world, we're not always expected to generate a monetary profit, and sometimes we have to deliver that service regardless of the cost for the common good. So we have another term that we use, and that is essentially, let's compare, actually, first return on investment, then social return on investment. So again, ROI compares the cost of the investment of how much was earned as a result of the investment. It is dollars per dollars. That's the key to ROI. You also have what's called cost benefit. You're familiar with that? I spent X numbers of dollars. how many, in this case, GEDs was earned by funding a school program, okay? So it's $1 related to the service, so the first one is return investment dollar per dollar, second one, dollar compared to the service, and the third one is us, okay? It's essentially, the word S means social. So we're looking more than the monetary. We're putting a monetary value as best we can, but it also gives us a breather to say there are other things that happen that we try to quantify in addition to the dollar value. And I'll give you examples of this. So I'm not expecting everything to sink into your head at the moment. Again, we teach from experience, right? So if there's any, and by the way, please ask me any questions. Just jump in anytime you want, okay? All right. So let's look at the building blocks here. We do this, right? We identify and we document the services or interventions, right? That's what we do. We try to associate, and we should associate those with outcomes. That's part of ROMA, but that's also the reporting system that we use at the national level, and you should do it anyway. All right, this is where some agencies do, majority don't. Someone possibly does this in your agency. You need to assign a unit cost for the service, all right? Someone in your fiscal office, and by a unit cost, I'll get into that in a little more detail, a unit cost is what does it cost to produce a unit of service, all right? And then the other side of that is what is the value of the outcome? Not just the outcome, but you're monetizing the outcome and you're monetizing the services. This is a new dimension. So again, in the Roma course, it was disappointing that that was sort of taken out for time, and yet it pulled it all together, and we'll get into how we do that. So here's the point. All services produce a measurable outcome. You may not get to it that easily. All outcomes have a value, but the value is not always monetary. That's the S is a license, a hunting license, so to speak, to look at a bigger picture, okay? All right, common language here. We're looking at results and outcomes. We use them interchangeably, okay? And then we break it down. Remember, community action has a unique methodology, family, agency, community. So in family, we're talking about stability, economic security, well-being. How do we quantify those terms? Agency is how well the agency can manage, use its money, find resources, deliver its programs. And the community is mobilizing public and private resources, working together, pooling practices, improving community infrastructure, things like that. I know of examples of cities that have changed bus routes to pick up low-income people so they could get to work, okay? In the hospitality industry, they would open up, especially in hotels that operate 24/7, they would provide transportation for folks to get to places. What is it, Vanguard, which is one of the big investment companies in Philadelphia, they would provide vans to the trains when the trains couldn't get to the offices and take people in a van pool to get to work. And we're talking service jobs. I mean, not high-fi, analysts, but people in, maintenance, custodial, those type of jobs. So that stuff, and those were community action. People actually were involved in community action to get that done. So, okay. By the way, I double-checked most of these. Those sites should be accurate. So if you want to, you can go to those sites and get materials as well. So everything here has a footnote or something attributable. All right, so if you look at the graphic, the ROI is just dollars. If you look at SROI, you could see people, dollars, and a sort of a tree. I didn't draw this, okay? So, but that's the bigger picture here. All right, so again, let's think about it as a sequence of how to do things. How does SROI convey impact? Again, all nonprofits are data collectors. We have to turn the data into messages and images that win over supporters, especially now, given where we are. Okay, but again, we can show the double bottom line. We have a financial impact and a social impact, and I'll show you examples of that. It's the social value that is often undervalued and not understood. So SROI helps determine the cost of what would happen if your organization did not exist. All right, again, these are graphics I pulled down, and what they all have behind them is these are final pictures, like one picture's worth 1,000 words. So there was data to support these. They weren't just graphics, okay? So in a visual, someone's doing a presentation. So you can see here on the left side, if we do nothing, 100 people will cost the public service system $7 million. We know that if people who are experiencing homelessness are on the streets, there's a lot more to emergency rooms and shelters and all that versus getting them into some sort of housing and getting support services. So in their model, again, you can see there's a website there to go to. The cost to change these lives is $2.7 million. So what they're saying in their model is that our $2.7 million essentially addressed a $7 million deficiency. So it was a good investment to invest in us. All right, here's another one. This one is a little fancier. This is from Minnesota. And again, if you can use this, you can find these on the web as well. So this is a mentoring program, and if you're talking about 170,000 youth in Minnesota, if you look at the different reductions, and again, there had to be hard data behind this or else this wouldn't be effective. Juvenile crime reduction, where the thumb is $371 per person, as an average of the 170,000. Truancy reduction. In other words, they monetized solving those problems, reduced tobacco use, increase in lifetime income, things like that. So basically what they're saying is the investment of $7,400 per person generated all of these savings, okay? And people don't think like this. Your local politicians and frankly the public just doesn't think like this. They just see these agencies as giveaways a lot of time, right? So, and if you're at the municipal level, you probably have a little bit different barriers because you're in the political world, if you're in local government. Okay, things like that. That's my working with local government. Right, here's another one. Colorado Institute for Social Impact. If you take a look here, what I like about this one, they have terms like fostering hope, which is qualitative. And if we're looking at taxpayer savings, and then they give you the dollars and they tell you where they save the money. Reduced homelessness, reduced criminal incidents, reduced unemployment, well-being, reduced teen pregnancy, et cetera. And they have a total return on investment. And what they're saying is for every $1 spent, we return $2.79 in actual value to the community, savings, okay? Does everyone understand the concept here? Again, you'll see how we do some of the calculations, but this is the big picture. This is the summary document after you've shown all the materials and you want to go ooh, ah, and things like that. All right, this one I just put up there because I like the colors. No. Frankly, it's impossible to read. No, but you can, but the point is this, I put this one up because they're showing the interrelationships here of different programs and services. So if you're in a community, you have here increased, security, safety, mental health, physical health. But again, clever graphics. The message is the same. I spent $1, I got $2.84 back, the cost per home. But again, you could go to the Colorado folks and get that get that information. So people have been doing this. I don't know how well they've been communicating this, but they've been doing this. Ooh, scared me there. All right. So let's take a look at some terminology here. So if we talk about economic value, and I think this is the standard business model, right? We take a resource or a set of inputs, we add something to that, and essentially we increase the value and we create a new program. So if you think about it, for example, if I'm building an automobile and I have a whole huge bin of parts, I paid for those parts, I assemble them and I have a car. The car has more value than the parts. Does that make sense? I mean, that's how it works. Okay. Social value, resources, inputs, processes generate improvements in the lives of individuals or society as a whole, and that's where most nonprofits justify their existence. So the example here is Head Start. You basically can move people out of poverty. You have kids ready to learn. You have folks invest in their communities by sitting on Head Start councils and things like that, and Head Start has been proven over and over to be a good program. Okay, so that's a good example of that one. So economic value, create a whole new program. A social value, it combines all the above. I don't know why I keep hitting that. There we go. All right. So here's some examples again. Let's take a look at weatherization. It's funny, Bradley mentioned that weatherization was in trouble. If I heard that correctly at lunch. Okay, I happen to like that program. And when I've worked with weatherization folks, what's very interesting about them is they like to measure things because that's what they do. So when I've done some results-oriented management accountability for the weatherization, they kind of really participate with what are they doing all day? They're measuring windows, they're checking energy, they get it, okay? All right, so let's take a look here. Okay, so what about social economic value? We are basically using resources, inputs, processing, and generating the cost savings to the public. So in weatherization, if you look at the middle one, right, we compared dollars expended and dollars saved. So we can show that if you weatherize a house, in the long run, you will show a reduction in energy use. Okay, that's sort of the basis of the program. So in terms of, that's the ROI, dollars per dollars, right? Dollars for weatherization, for dollars for the savings. Then let's look at the benefit cost. So the benefit cost is we spent the dollars, we reduced the kilowatt hours in a number of homes, so it's the benefit is how many hours of energy do we reduce with the intervention that we did. But let's take a look at what's been overlooked in SROI. So if we look at the weatherization, and this is speaking from a major project we did in Louisville a few years ago, and I'll get to that in a second. So basically, weatherization not only just fixes the window, but it also can take a neighborhood and stabilize and fix that neighborhood. And if you go in there, that neighborhood, what does it do? It creates the safety, it adds value to the community, it stabilizes, is what happened in Louisville. And essentially, if you look at the 4 bullets, repaired existing properties, maintain value, stabilized, increase in value of the property, possible increase in the value of the tax base. Third one, people remained in their own homes. A lot of these homes were substandard and unsafe. Weatherization allowed people to stay in their homes. And the last one is older persons able to remain in homes and age in place rather than be placed in assisted living. So these are things that people are not measuring. And that's what makes me crazy about this. It's sort of obvious, but it's not obvious. All right, this is something, last I checked, they were still doing this. Goodwill, right? You've either donated something or picked up a bathing suit for the summer or something. But what they do is they have a little calculator, and I thought it was pretty cool what they did. And you can just go in there and play with this thing. So what they're doing is they're looking at the value of donations and how it helps their mission. So these are screenshots. You can see here, you put in, they put all the different items that are in there. And as you could see, you make the decision, is the donation good, better, or best? And they monetize that. There's dollar values associated with that. So they know now there's your unit cost in their world, okay? Then what they do is they have a calculator in there. And essentially, I just did this myself. You put the numbers in. So what they're saying is, I donated X number of goods. The value is $170. And that generated 9.59 hours of program hours. That's their outcome. They're an agency. So there it is. So I feel like I did something worthwhile, but then they could also show that by, you may not think of a shirt or some, books or records or a piece of furniture, but they turn it around. And that's, I think, frankly, a really good marketing piece on them because this is totally available to the public. All right, so let's take a look at what type of social return on investments we can get. Well, the first one is cost savings, right, where you actually, a good example is using the community-based health center rather than expensive emergency rooms. I can go all day talking about emergency rooms, having once worked in one. They are basically de facto shelters, restaurants, everything but healthcare. So the point is, if you have a program where people could go to a community-based healthcare rather than an expensive hospital, you save your money. Anyone want to guess why that doesn't always work? Okay, here's the problem. The hospital saves money. The community action agency or the nonprofit doesn't get the money back. There is no mechanism for that. This has been demonstrated through foundations that this stuff works, the diversion programs. But unless you change the nature of healthcare insurance and reimbursement, if you save a CAT scan, you've probably saved $1,500. Give $200 of that back to the nonprofit for a shelter or a sandwich. And so we know what works, but you can't always get the rules changed. But that is helpful, all right. Multiplying impact, we know that nonprofits leverage all kind of funds and they get matching dollars. So a lot of times if you're good at this, you can increase your assets by bringing in other assets. And the last one is strengthening community. Nonprofits connect to each other. Again, healthy communities are people who quality of life, et cetera, et cetera. So, all right, so where do we begin? Sort of a bit of a cookbook here. Theory of change, in other words, translating to English, what social or economic impact are you trying to accomplish? Right, that's what theory of change is. And you can Google that. It's in the Roma materials as well. All right, second thing, what are you producing? What are your services? All right, what are you creating? What are you administrating? You develop the performance indicators, all part of logic models. Track outcomes, the third one. How do we know what we're doing is good, right? That makes a difference. Pre and post. When client comes in the door, you should be doing an assessment. You assign service, or you identify the assessment from what you hope to achieve. You get the service. And there's supposed to be follow-up. I hope you all do on some level of that to show that what happened as a result of a service. That's the bottom line for what we do. Not that you gave the service, but what happened as a result of the service. All right. The last one there, this is where you get focus groups, collect the data, and start sharing that information. Right? What is it you achieved? How did you do together? In the climate that we're in, I would encourage everyone to start working as colleagues collectively, because the easiest way to really is divide us up. And we share a common mission, so we want to bring that together. And again, you can see a link to a website that would give you more information. All right. So again, more on the technical. This is your PowerPoint. You can use this anytime. So what's the big picture? The need. Okay, so in this case, it was an example of a high percentage of malnourished children in the community. All right, the input, that's the resources, what resources your mission needs, and this could be a consistent distribution of food to children. We know this is coming between SNAP and the reduction in school-based food programs. This is going to be real. Okay, activities, what needs to be done? Again, in this example, arrange for partnerships in the community, purchase food, arrange for delivery. And then the outcomes, what happened? So 100% of kids gained weight, 85% had better grades in school, 90% fewer health problems. You can collect this data. And that's why you need partnerships to get this. And then, actually I jumped ahead, I'm sorry. The outputs on the right, how many people got the products, and then of all the people who got the products, what happened? That's the outcome, okay? So again, feel free to use this methodology. This is sort of classical way of doing it. All right. There was a gentleman named Reginald Carter. He was a colleague of mine. And he came up with a real simple methodology that we put into the Roma materials just because it was so simple and clean. I can walk into an agency, any agency in the United States, and ask those 7 questions. It tells me instantly how good an agency they are. Okay, I can diagnose it in 5 minutes, and I'm trying to be arrogant here, but if you can answer those questions, you should have that information. If you have any kind of a quality database, or you could get that information. And they're sequential, by the way. They feed into each other. First question, how many clients are you serving? Who are they? Okay, those are the demographics. What services do you give them? Now here's where his methodology was different. He put in the cost. So much of our budget in human services is over with the fiscal folks. They know what's going on. That'd be as if you had your checkbook or your online credit card and you paid no attention to how much you were spending and how much things cost. And a lot of folks do not pay attention. That has to be built into an agency. All right, and then arithmetic. What does it, and I'll show you an example in a minute. What does it cost per service delivered? Well, the cost is the whole budget. The service cost is unit cost per person. And then what was really novel is he added in, and this, by the way, first came out around 1979, and we built it into the Roma materials. What happened to the client as a result of a service? Okay? And the part that was really novel is what did it cost to produce the outcome? This is how you begin to get into return on investment. All right, so here's an example. Very simple. 100 clients, who are they? This is the group, single unemployed women, 21-34, looking for a job, 1 kid under 12. So we knew who they were. And what did we do? We gave them a package of job readiness, placement, job, all that kind of stuff. All right, so here's our first number. What did it cost? $150,000. That's for the entire program. Arithmetic. We take the $150,000, we divide it by the 100. Win or lose, we're going to spend $1,500 per person for that program. Right? That's a sunk cost. Standard business model. All right, so what Carter did was he added these other pieces. What happens to the client as a result of the service? All right, so what we're saying is 10 clients or 10% obtained a full-time job above minimum wage. That's 10 of 100. So unless you understood the bigger picture, your first reaction is 90 failed, right? We're thinking the opposite way, 10 succeeded. Right, what did it cost per outcome? And by the way, when people see numbers like this 10, they don't want to report because they think they failed, when in fact that's only part of the picture. So number 7, what did it cost per outcome? Well, I spent the $150,000, that's gone. I divide it by 10, those are my success stories. And when I'm done, it cost me $15,000 to produce that outcome. So $1,500 to produce the service, we understand that the difference, okay? And $15,000 to be successful. So this is the benefit cost. If we stop here, we're in trouble. All right. So let's just divert for a second. How do we calculate costs? We're talking about accounting. And if you think about how an accountant would see the world, salaries, benefits, administrative and support services, overhead, client services not directly provided by the agency, and value of donations. I spent some time in state government once upon a time, and then in the private sector. And I remember a state employee one day said to me, why is your hourly rate that much money? And I said, do you pay for your parking? No. Do you pay for your vacation? No. Do you pay for your sick leave? No. Do you pay for your retirement? No. Do you pay for your office space? No. He goes, oh, I get it. You know? I mean, it was that simple. It's just a lack of, he wasn't fighting me, he just didn't think it through. He saw his check. All right, so we need to think about all of that, and accountants are the ones who think like this. Anyone an accountant here? Whoa, 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 3 of you. I'm impressed. All right, so if I say something stupid, just let me know, yeah? All right. And also, the last one, donations, right? As a value, comes into the bottom line there, all right. All right, where I come in is, I saw Carter's 7 questions, and I got permission, and we expanded the methodology to include return on investment. So I built on his 7 questions. So essentially, adding 2 questions allowed us to calculate return on investment scenarios. So 8 and 9 of those questions, essentially they were developed about valuing services and where we can establish a monetary value. So let's take a look at where we added in the 2 others. So remember those first 7 that are there. We had to provide a value of a successful outcome. That is the hardest part of the 7 or the 9 questions. How does one value some of those outcomes? Not easy. And then the return on investment is, again, arithmetic. I'm comparing the value to the cost. And I can do it for the person, which is in the middle of the page or screen, and I can do it for the whole agency. And let's take a look at an example. All right, so what is the value of that job? And I'm being very conservative here. And by the way, if you use numbers, in my entire career, I have never, ever been challenged and lost a challenge only because I put a footnote and I explain my thinking. It's that simple. They could argue about my thinking, but as long as I'm transparent about numbers and I do it, then I can win, okay? It's kind of how it works. All right, so let's take a look at that person, the 10 people that got jobs. So let's say modestly, income from employment, 20,000. I had benefits, 4,000, earned income tax credits, 3,000. I paid taxes, 500, and I reduced or eliminated some welfare or other subsidized benefits for 6,000. This is from an accounting perspective. I can say that that value of that job is 33,500, not the 20,000, but 33,500. So then I want to do the arithmetic here. I've learned, by the way, in human services, if I use the word math, people freak out. If I use arithmetic, they feel very comfortable. And then the question is, did you go through 4th grade? Yes, we did. Well, then you should know how to do this, you know. So if you look at the social return on investment, this is the addition to that methodology. The value of the outcome is 33,500. I'm comparing that to the cost, and I have a 223% return. That's real, okay? So the hardest part, again, is putting the value and making sure it's accurate, accountable. So let's take a look at this here. So if I look at the whole program, okay? It cost me cost the agencies $150,000 to operate that program. 10 people were successful. The value of those 10 is $335,000. So the cost of the program at $150,000 returned $335,000 in benefits with a 10% success rate. That's the methodology, and that's real, and we're not using it. Okay, yeah.
You ever factor in time? That's the value of it over a year, right? Is that your annual salary?
It's not a salary, it'd be over you're talking about the cost of, well, it could be 3 months, 6 months. In other words, yeah, the staff time would be built into this, if that's what you're asking.
No, like the wages, like if she's making a $20,000 job, that's considering.
Oh yeah, that'd be an annual, yes.
That's the value.
Right,
For 1 year.
yes, correct, yes, thank you. All right, I'm gonna change it now.
Well, it gets even better the longer she maintains that job.
Yes, and get a raise and things like, yeah, because think about it, that's,
Assuming they stay in the job.
Sure.
yeah. But you're right, the 1 year investment, 2, 3 years, it multiplies. Thank you. Okay, here. All right. All right, so again, look at the difference. So when you look, and I'll just bring you back here for a second, that's a good investment, and that's real, and that's with, quote, a 90% non-success rate. But actually, it's not as simple as that. It's a better story here. It's based on real numbers. So let's take a look at a similar program, 100 clients, and it cost us $600,000. So again, let's look at the thriving. This is the standard Roma scale. You may recognize it, all right? So if you look at thriving, full-time employment above minimum wage, employer-provided benefits, 10%, and in this case, we're saying that that job is worth $50,000, okay? Safe, full-time employment above minimum wage, but limited sick leave, vacation, no subsidized benefits, and we're saying that's worth $41,000. And then stable, full-time minimum wage, no benefits, and if you see the numbers, 10, 15, 35, and above that we call the prevention line. That's your positive return on investment. So we had 500,000, 621,000, 168,000. Now here's what also didn't happen, if we want to be real about this. Part-time jobs, 15, and we lost money, okay? It was a negative 25 because you're also providing benefits, so that they're not earning as much. And then you got another 25 that nothing happened with. And you spent the $20,000 and it's gone. So what you have here is when you combine the thriving, safe, and stable with the vulnerable and crisis, even with the losses, you have $751,000 value. Now here's where the methodology comes in. Basically, you have to explain how you got those numbers. So in a case like this, you see the column on the left is the actual arithmetic. And then you see the salary and employee benefits, and then you see how we got there. So if you see for the top one, which is thriving, avoidance of TANF, food stamps, medical assistance, and subsidized childcare, that was monetized at $18,000, and that is how we showed that we saved those dollars, okay? So again, you can study this, look at it, when you download it, but every basis here has an associated methodology to explain how we got it. And that's important, because if you're sitting down with business people, this is an equalizer. You can sit with business people and they go, aha, okay? One day I was at a car dealership. I was a little bored, and I I was sitting there waiting for servicing. So I asked the salesperson, basically, what's success? So he tells me, the numbers are pretty close, but X numbers of people he knew would walk in the lot and look at the car. Never go in. X numbers of people, then some numbers people would walk into the dealership and look at the car. Then another group would sit down and try to negotiate, but they didn't necessarily sign. And then there was that fourth group that actually signed the contract. And they knew the numbers. They knew how many people it took to enter the grounds of a dealership for this guy to make a sale and get paid. And they knew that. You could go next time you're at a car dealer, ask that question. You'll get a similar answer, okay? So, all right. So let's take a look, types of models. There's the cost savings and cost avoidance. In other words, you demonstrate, right now people want to save costs, whatever that means anymore. And those that can demonstrate increased income or revenue. They're both there, two different models. All right, All of these are projects that our organization was involved in, so there's a lot more material behind this. If you ever want it, you can email, I think contact us on the bottom of this. All right, the first one was the asthma prevention program called the Coatesville Family Center in Chester, Pennsylvania. What happened is they knew kids were sick and were having asthma, and they hired a public health nurse, one person in the agency, and her job was education, to teach the family and the kids basically to prevent an asthma attack, because once a person is in an asthma attack, if it's not caught, that could frankly be fatal. I mean, it does happen, but that's usually you're sick, all right? All right. So basically, here's what floored me. I was called into the agency to do something unrelated, and I got to know this woman. She did this on her own. No one told her to do this. It blew me away, public health nurse. So she showed that they reduced emergency room visits from 5 to 2. These numbers are probably 15 years old. And that's the savings per child. By coincidence, the crisis office visits, 5 to, she had hard data, okay? And they saved the dollars per child for the physician visits. And what she showed was the annual savings per child in preventive care was $1,464. So, okay. You can grab a seat if you want.
Do you want me to go over there, or are you good?
Yeah. This gentleman's going to help me with the live demo of the calculator. So, yeah, you can sit here. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't mind me, don't mind me.
Why don't you sit down? Sit down. Ben, sit down. All right, all right, all right. Yeah. All right. All right. So let's look at this of how we designed this. You saw the savings there, $250 per child annually, and net savings and crisis costs of $1,464 of the whole program. When you added up the savings to the physician in the hospital, $83,000, we took her salary away at the time, whatever she was getting paid, and basically it netted out $69,000. That's your cost savings. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the hospital saved the money, society saved the money. That money did not go back to pay for the salary. That's what's missing in our system. All right, so looking at that same methodology, there's your question 7, 8, and 9. All right, the cost to produce the outcome per kid was $250. That's her salary divided up among the kids, okay? The value was $1,464. We knew that because we had the hard data. And if you compare the cost of the outcome to the value, it's a 580% return. That's huge in a life-saving type program. So here's where what I learned. All right, so for every dollar in preventive care, I generate $580 in savings. All right, this is what I learned. Peter Drucker always said, talk to the customer, talk to the client. I had an opportunity to talk to the mothers of these kids because I was in that agency. This is what they told me. I didn't even think about this at the time. School absenteeism, these kids were sick. Okay, they couldn't do their homework. These kids repeated grades and they were humiliated and embarrassed having to go through another class. Mothers quit their jobs in order to stay home with the kids and then improve physical and mental well-being of the child, improve physical and mental well-being of the family. Can you imagine trying to monetize that, what that's worth? It's huge. For a public health nurse to teach someone how to catch an asthma attack before it happens in an expensive care and hospitalization. So I learned a lot. I understood the numbers, but I did not understand that. That was amazing. All right. This one's one of my favorite programs, and we were heavily involved in this. This is a few years ago in Louisville. The REACH program basically helps low-income households reduce energy use and become energy self-sufficient. Okay, so when we sat down, we were the researchers and evaluators. It was a partnership between the Community Action Agency, the state association like Colorado Association, the Community Action Agency in the city of Louisville, and city government. And it was a really cool partnership, okay? So these were our goals: minimize health and safety risks for high energy burden on folks, prevent homelessness, right? If you can't pay the bills or the house is not good, increase the efficiency, and target individual most in need. All right, so what we did is the program was set up for seniors. There were 150 homeowners, and this is, anyone know Louisville? There's a historic section there where these old Victorians were, and they were deteriorating. So 150 client family, they were all homeowners. They were all eligible for LIHEAP. They had high energy uses, and we at the time wanted them to put some sweat equity into the program as well. But when we interviewed these folks, they were older, and we took that requirement away. I mean, it just was not there. All right. So here are our numbers. 150 enrolled, 144 stayed with the duration of the program. They received really good case management, energy education, counseling. The services were home inspection, energy efficient materials, equipment supplies to reduce the burden and measured in reductions in both usage and cost, livability, and preventing homelessness. These were the goals. All right, here's the actual data. So 144 families were able to remain in their own homes. That's a huge number. Okay, 59% decreased usage, energy usage or expenditures, 45% reduced both. And by the way, if anyone wants a copy of this, send me your name. I'll send you the report. It's all there. You can have the whole report. Savings, $15,000 by each client. No one had a utility shut off, no record of arrearages. And here's the key, 54% increased their household income because they weren't spending it on other higher costs. Okay, this is again, I did not know this. I learned this talking to the homeowners. The majority of these were women, they were older, and they told us that with this program, they were able to continue living in that home as opposed to being placed in assisted living. That made a huge difference. Okay, so what we did then is we looked at the cost of a personal care boarding home compared to staying in their home. The cost of the boarding home was about $1,500 to $6,000 monthly. So I mentioned earlier that SROI is what would happen if you didn't intervene. That's what would have happened. They could have ended up in an expensive situation. So then we looked at the average monthly placement in Louisville, and it would have been about $2,000 a month versus the whole program was $15,000 for the house. So you can see right there you're going to save. 10 families, it worked in terms of keeping them keeping them in their homes, and that would have saved the community $240,000. Here's what I also learned. These were 2- and 3-story buildings, and they were multi-generational. It was the grandmother, the kids, her kids, and the grandkids, and they're all under one roof. So think about if you had to find housing for 3 generations versus 1 generation. And this was an incredibly successful program. Again, the problem is they become demonstration projects, the cooperation, and they go on some level, but they just don't have the sustainability, okay? So again, and the other thing is those homes were able to stay on the tax base. They fixed them up, nice neighborhood, the whole thing, all right. This one is in Denver, and Bayard Enterprises serves people with physical, emotional, mental health as well. It's probably a good way to describe it. How would you describe it? Disabilities, yeah, all type, okay. City of Denver gave them a grant, and if you know Denver, you know where the governor's mansion is in the park there. There have been encampments right in front of it, and people decided, this is probably not the best thing to do. So what they did is they gave them $400,000, and they went right into the park opposite the governor's mansion to recruit these folks who were living in tents, park benches, the whole thing, and essentially got them into a program. And they had a pilot program. This is when it first started, 2016, 2017. So again, in this case, is a plug, our software ran the program, okay? And we did the evaluation. The city didn't trust us to be, we were advocates for the agency, so they hired the University of Colorado to look over our shoulders, to verify all the numbers, and they were perfectly good, okay? So again, the numbers are here, how many people recruited, how many worked. And what's interesting is the people stayed in the job, and when it was all said and done, I think it was about 60% of the people ended up with full-time jobs. And what was crazy is that the news picked it up, and it was maybe not 60, it was like 50-something%. The media picked it up, TV and all that, they had all kind of, and then the reporter said, only 50%. And the director calls, I call the executive director, and I said, David, another David, I said, you understand that what you did was a miracle? I have never seen anything above 30%. Now, I just made that up based on my knowledge of literature. So he said, find me. It took me 1 hour online. I found half a dozen studies. I could find nothing above 30%. These were people experiencing homelessness, had all kinds of problems. This was a wildly successful program. And I said, the city didn't know it, but you know what? Your staff didn't know it. And that's what upset me the most. They were wildly successful. And by the way, the jobs were not just makeup jobs. They had a guy who was an electrician. You see him working on the lights. I mean, you see this. And I was in the agency one day, and the thing that they did, I don't know how they did it legally, but they did it. At the end of the day, the van would pick these folks up, mostly men, and they had their tools, and they get whatever they got back, and they would give them $75 cash. And they used the cash properly. And guess what happened the next year? The city gave them $400,000. What happened the next year? The city gave them $400,000. And one of the counties, was it Adams or one of the other border counties copied the program. I forgot what it was. Denver Day Works. Joanne might know. Okay, yeah. So in other words, they had a really good program, okay? And it was, Joanne and I have worked together with this agency. That's why we know this. But they did it. They actually proved that it was a huge, and for the city, $400,000 to keep people who were employed off the benches. And the other thing the city, VIII did, which is really cool, they had shower trucks. So this nice vehicle would come on site, you'd clean up, go to work, take a shower. You felt like a human being. Okay, it was that cool.
You did laundry too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the laundry, thank you.
More popular, but
Yeah. And,
no, that was the biggest issue
The-
is
the-
they're wearing socks.
yeah,
That
yeah.
was the hardest thing to
That's
face
true.
in those situations.
So here's the other thing. At times, they never kept these trucks idle. They took the trucks to the schools where you had low-income kids. They were able to take a shower, clean their clothes. I mean, it touches you when you think about such a simple solution. Actually, I don't know if you're aware of this. I got an email from HACAP in Iowa.
Mhm.
They had read about this. So this is like last week, I got an email from one of the directors in Iowa saying, can you tell me about this? So I connected them to the two agencies. But they had the same thought. Let's get a shower truck. Treat people with dignity as well. All right, so as you can see here, when we're talking about case expenditures, you need to monetize these items. And again, I'll just give you an example here. What you do is you're comparing the cost, the expenditures. As we mentioned, case management, the accountants in the room could clarify that, but the point is it was all built in. And then you want to compare it to the return. Taxes, income from employment, reduction in subsidized benefit, emergency services, things like that. All right. I just created this chart here because what it showed is the value on a monthly basis. So if you look at 150% of poverty, energy assistance, it's $25 a month. School and free lunch, $100. So what you can say is that those benefits, in the case at the bottom right, the Head Start family would save, what, $3,300. So essentially, you have a number. This is what gives you credibility because you know what if you're going to identify a cost savings or reduction, you know where that, and you can get those numbers online. It's pretty easy, okay? All right, so what we're talking about is sort of bringing this together here. We're really talking the language of the for-profit world. It's an equalizer. You have board members run the business community. This is where United Way is business, right? They're all business people who donate money. So you talk this way a little bit with human services. It can help in competition for funding in other agencies. You have positive impact for the client. And here's the bottom line. A modest success can generate a positive return. We are working with some of the most complicated cases, clients, families. They're complex, okay? But if you have a 10% success and it pays for itself, that's a good investment. And the business world gets that. There's a chart in the Roman materials. We look at industry measures. Pharmaceuticals are like 20% success. But the point is, it generates enough income that it pays for the 80% that do not generate the revenue. Okay, and you get real numbers, by the way. again, in our industry, we don't have realistic numbers for our success rates. Individual agencies might, but if you pull it together, what's the statistics that said, if I put people in job programs, what's the likelihood of a group of people with these demographics to get a job? I mean, that's somewhat local, but it'd be nice to get a bigger number. Okay, this one was quite interesting. A few years ago, they took a survey. You know, we all do client satisfaction surveys. And what they did is they matched the client with the caseworker on how well they did and the benefit that they got. The clients rated the caseworkers higher than the caseworkers rated themselves, which told you that the caseworkers did not know that they had a positive impact as much as they did. And I called that a low self-esteem industry. So part of it is sharing that data with staff. Bayard did not know that they were wildly successful. 50, 60% when it's never been above 25, 30. They had no idea. So if you think you're treading water and not making a difference when in fact you are, that's a horrible feeling, okay? All right, so to bring this together, and then we'll do a quick demo here. Harder to serve populations may have lower SROI than easier to serve. I think we have to be aware that people have complicated lives. Non-financial factors may outweigh the economic value at times. Numbers can vary by community, things like that. And again, it's an approximation tool. You want to be conservative, stick to things you can defend. Things like employment programs, education, some of the energy, they're sort of, we understand these, okay? Transportation might be another one. And it's also common that we're all using the same services. Okay, principles involve stakeholders, get everyone in the organization, and stakeholders inside and outside the organization. Understand what changes before and afterwards when you have a program. Again, you could read this in the online. And you want to value things that matter, okay? I can give you the one thing I've discovered in this industry, you don't have to make up the stories, okay? An agency in Pennsylvania wanted to do one of these for the commodities, the big block cheeses. Anyone ever deal with the cheese? There you go, okay. Blocks of cheese from, I guess, surplus or whatever it was. And in a class like this, the person who ran the program kept insisting that she needed to do this for cheese. And I thought, of all the time, try to talk her out of, there are more important programs than measuring the cheese, okay? All right. Can't make this up. A week and a half later, I'm in an agency up the highway about 10 or 12 miles, and I walk in and there's a big table, and there are the blocks of cheese. And I said, where did you get the cheese? Oh, that's from the community action agency down the road. The clients don't like the cheese. So there it was. I mean, there's no return on investment. They had a program that was totally ineffective, and they were doing it because they always did it. And I've heard other people say, how come they don't use our program? And the answer is because the clients are not getting anything out of it. So they're talking on the feet. But the cheese story always struck me as crazy, but there it was. All right. All right, last one, the principles. Only identify what's material. Don't overclaim, you don't have to do that. Be transparent in the blue. Verify the result. And again, you got a place to get that methodology there. So, okay, so what I want to do is, Ben, if you can give me a hand here. Someone's phone. All right. Yeah, okay. Here. Put this here. Well, we'll show you in a minute. Here. I have to get out of here. Here, go.
You gonna see anything incriminating in here?
No.
Which is good.
Okay, actually, before we do this, yeah, hold on a second here. Just run through this. Okay, so what this is, it's in a different mode here. This is a calculator that was funded partly by us and partly by the State Association in California called CalCAPA. It's the same thing as the Colorado Community Association. And what we did is we wanted to build a simple calculator to show how this works. By the way, if you go online, you can type in social return on investment calculators. People are now building them, okay? So essentially, it's really a teaching tool, but it also works. And it's, okay, so this is what it looks like. You'll see it in a minute. And what you can do is, if you get this, if you go to our website, it's free. You have to put a name in and your email. We will not solicit you. We don't do that. Okay, so you can play with it. And there's also a user guide that is also an advocacy guide. It's about 14, 15 pages. Okay, yeah. So at the end of this, if you find out, that's our contact information. Okay, so here. All right, if you want to go to
Pete
the
Davidson.
yeah.
I got it.
All right, just go log in.
All sorts of cool things that are happening in the news.
Oh, yeah, what else? Pete Davidson. Yeah, the nice thing about the news is every hour you have a new. All right, so this is what our website looks like, and you scroll down and see it says free social return on investment calculator. Just click that, and what it would do is tells you what it is, and you just basically put your name in and the email, and I promise you, you will not get the solicitation. Now,
Oops. Try it again. It's fun. There's the traffic lights.
you know why it's there, right? They're training AI, it has nothing to do with security. It's strictly to train AI. Okay. So, we can both talk here, but here.
When I get the stoplight thing, I thought that it was like the whole.
Okay.
Well, on the side of the pole too, so it's like you have to.
Yeah, John, I have family that work in Google, and they say, no, it's nothing to do with security. It's just we're teaching AI how to recognize things. All right, so a couple quick things. This is what it looks like. If you go on the right, it says day mode off. You can change the color, top right. So it depends on if you like it that way or the other way, okay? All right, let's just go to the user guide for a second. You could download this. This is as much an advocacy piece, kind of reiterating some of the things I've talked about. And basically, it's also a cookbook. So it tells you how to use the calculator. It's pretty easy, frankly. But it also explains why this is important and things like that. All right, so if we go to the calculator, and we only built it out basically for 2 programs. Again, it was designed, and here's the thing, we had limited funds. This could easily be built into software, but we need some additional funds. So if you go under employment and training, you can see here, there's your budget. Okay, you can put in, I don't know, 150, whatever number you want to put in. And we can come up with clients enrolled, 500 or something. Okay, so you'll see right here, it did the calculation, unit cost per client, 1,000. You see that there? Okay. Then you want to put the outcome in, and you have a list. This is all pre-populated. So let's just say right now, you can do more than one, but let's just say, let's do full-time for a moment. Okay. And you see the value there. So we have tables, obviously, that support this. So there's your value. And if we say how many, so right now, you could see here, the unit costs $1,000. And if we put in, let's say 500, let's put in 200 clients achieve the outcome. All right. And if you do that, what you'll see here is on the bottom left, your client success rate is 40%. And the value of the outcome is 10 million, okay, based on those numbers. So social return on investment, 2,000%. Now, again, you'd have to be realistic. What we did is we sat down with folks, and we did have a whole list of outcomes. Actually, if you want to go back for there, yeah, just add it, yeah, click. Okay, so you can see the different jobs we had, full-time, part-time, paid apprenticeship, okay, and currently employed and increased. So you had 4 different possible outcomes. Let's go over, excuse me, yeah. So those are the ones, and the values change by doing that, okay? So that's, the idea here was, again, it's not, how could I say, it's a web-based tool, it's not a real piece of software. But the idea here was to show it so people understand the relationships. That's why the user guide is there. If you go to, and if you look down here, then you can add the services, okay? So if you look here, coaching, All right, and what happens is it forces you to make sure that those numbers add up to the correct budget amount. Okay, so if we, let's see, hold on a second. All right.
That's the budget.
Yeah, okay, so the point is this. Yeah, you'd have to change the numbers here, right. So the point is, it gives you the ability to show multiple services, produce the outcomes, okay? All right, so if you, as long as the total budget is under $500,000 by all the services, it's fine. It turns red if you've in other words, if you put too much into it, so it does stop it, okay? So what it does is it'll tell you essentially the values on each one, the success rate and all that. So you can play with this, you know, and then we did the same thing for weatherization.
You have to start.
Yeah, go ahead, you can just, all right, you're good. All right, so again, put your number in. Whatever clients, I don't know. Okay. And again, if you look at the outcomes, you see here decreased energy and decreased energy use, cost, value of property. And again, what we did is we monetized these because we talked to agencies to get those numbers. Okay, so it works the same way. You know, the unit cost per client, $6,600. The return was what, 20? Where's the total return there? Well, the total return is 1.5 million, 150%, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to point out that you can play with this, you can use it, but it's really to orient and teach people that there is a relationship between the service, the outcome, the value of the outcome, and the return on the investment. And this could be done for many different programs. So it's there. We stopped the project because, again, it was we did a lot of this on our own dime, but we needed some additional support. But the idea was not to charge for this, you know, just put it out there. The CalCappa website has the same tool. So if you go to, I don't know what's it, if you just type in CalCappa, you get the same exact tool that is there, and they haven't done anything more. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're good. You want to shut it down?
You gonna give a plug-in for me tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, on your agenda, so this is Ben Richmond. He's the CEO of Center for Applied Management Practices. He's doing a presentation tomorrow on AI, and it's
It's gonna be awesome. Plus, we're gonna do 45 minutes of ChatGPT and how to train your systems for community action agencies.
yeah, this is real. It's not just theory. He has been experimenting with this, and yeah, I won't give away your message, but it can fundamentally change the way services are delivered in human service agencies. You won't need a lot of the staffing, because a lot of this can be done.
Consulting services,
Yeah,
one OG standards, look at them and you can edit them down, but it's, as consultants, we've been in the field for what, collectively 60 years between the two of us?
not
Been
that long.
consulting for a long time, but a lot of what we're doing, you can see ChatGPT if you know what you're doing to edit it down, but things that would take us weeks or months to put together, you can do in days, not less.
Yeah.
So it's consultants learning how to consult through ChatGPT, and I think it's important with budgetary constraints that a lot of these things get leveraged into the community action agencies yourself, so you can use that money for direct services and staff and reduce some of the external products and things like that that
Yeah.
you can now get under your own hood.
Yeah,
But we'll get into that. So
that's tomorrow.
yep,
So.
tomorrow.
Okay, so I have no, yeah, thank you, I'm good, yeah. What time is it?
About 5.
22?
4:41, 22.
Oh, okay, that's good. So I threw a lot at you. As I said, the PowerPoint, you can download it, you know, from the website. Please play with the calculator, and frankly, give us any feedback. I would love to hear, because I said this is a project that we initiated with the California folks, and it was interesting when we worked with some of the agencies. The weatherization folks were great. Once again, they're responding to the emails, they're providing the numbers, they get this stuff. And that's, again, to kill that program is so stupid, or lie heap, when in fact, but the problem is we have not done this. It was not shown that, as opposed to sucking dollars, right, out of people who don't deserve it, as opposed to saying, you know, this is a smart investment because everyone is helped and it reduces costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, I know it's the end of the day, so.
Well, I would say I was excited to see registered apprenticeship because
Oh, good.
I have a feeling that's really going to help
Yeah.
outline, because they saw the big numbers and they're like, oh, well, you're spending $15,000 per apprentice, but you're not, you're just helping them get a small raise, and it's like, no, we're doing so much more than
Right.
that. So I am really looking forward, and I'm excited to see apprenticeship
Yeah.
on there, because a lot of times that falls out, but that's such a great pathway to success.
Good. Well, those of you who've taken Roma, you know we use this baseball card analogy, and with the exception of the Rockies, who I know are terrible. I mean, I knew that before Bradley said it, but it's the only place I know that it probably costs more for a beer than a ticket to get in. But the point is, if you're batting over 300, which means roughly 1 in 3 times you're successful, you would think failure, right? But only like 20 major league stars out of the whole network hit above 300. But baseball taught us that that's as good as it gets. So if you didn't know that, you would think you're 2/3 failure, when in fact the 1/3 success are the superstars who make $20 million a year. And that's where a lot of his thinking came from, was looking at, frankly, baseball cards. And the one in the book, the Roma book, is an old baseball card of Yogi Berra, the famous catcher. And if you look at the stats, it looks just like a Roma table. It's hysterical. If you look, it's in the book, but you look at the bottom and you'll see at bat, number of hits, this, that. It's pretty funny. So, but the world operates on those performance measures and monetizes them. What was the movie about baseball that was a big hit a few years ago? So a comedy. It was, who did it star? No, that's another one. No, it's it was the guy who was the manager. Yes, Moneyball. Thank you, Moneyball. Yeah. If you watch, it's like a training film. If you if you watch Moneyball, they're doing Roma. Just take a look at it. Okay. I did like Field of Dreams too, but that's another story. So anyway, thank you all for being here, and hopefully you can use some of this and move on. And those of it, tomorrow morning, I am going to use a few of these slides in my keynote, so I'm taking it to a broader message, but I want to get those fundamental principles so everyone sees it tomorrow morning. So, okay, thank you.